You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hat.
Hi, this is Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
Hey everyone, this is Tanya. So today we have a really interesting series to discuss, but also just some characters and different things having to deal directly with a psychiatrist who is just not a good person or a good psychiatrist. We're going to be talking about the series The Shrink Next Door, but also some of the characters within this, because this is a true story. There was a podcast that was actually made from this prior to the series. It really goes into a wacky story, but just one that we thought was important to discuss because it really has a lot of elements of ethics in therapy and emotional abuse and things that we aim to not do.
What
so this
not
could be
to
like
do.
the how to not do therapy. It really yeah, it really is almost a perfect guide to that. Yeah, because this is just a wild ride. If you have not heard, the podcast is really great. Erin and I agree it's a little slow. It kind of takes a while to build up to it and you're a little unsure what's going on, which is probably how maybe Marty felt, the main character in this, or one of the main characters. Maybe it was just kind of a slow burn, so maybe that's why they did it like that. But it's a little tough if you're not super into it to watch. But nevertheless, we braved through it, and we want to discuss it and the different characters. First of all, we are absolutely going into elements that if you have not watched this and you don't want any spoiler alerts, then go watch the series or listen to the podcast or read the articles, whatever it is. But probably, again, as we always say, if you're coming here, you're probably wanting to listen to this and our commentary. So yeah, there's two main characters, Ike, the psychiatrist, and Marty, who becomes his patient. And we see that Marty is coming to Ike at a very vulnerable time in his life. His parents have just died. He's had a relationship breakup, and Ike is not a good psychiatrist. He doesn't have his best, the best interest for his patients. In the real life story, it sounds like he's kind of done this before.
I don't think so.
The series doesn't get into that too much. I don't know.
I did listen to the podcast a couple years ago when it first came out. I was just really interested in it because it was done by the journalist who uncovered everything, but I don't think he really goes so far into the background. I can't remember, but I don't think it really goes a lot into the background of Ike. I know Marty is interviewed a couple times in the podcast, and that's fairly interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of dynamics here that we just wanted to discuss, in therapy. Well, I mean, honestly, it really is a how-to not to do therapy. And just to kind of say, make some commentary and see. Also, this is a different time period, but still, I don't think has ever been considered right for any type of therapy. Hopefully not. But this takes place in the early 80s. I think they met in 1981. That's when Marty became Ike's patient. And, just he was kind of lost his parents. He had a family business. Ike, you can see from the series that there's a point where the doctor kind of hones in and says, oh my gosh, I could take advantage of this guy. You can see a light bulb go off in his head. And he starts to infuse himself in Marty, his patient's life, and basically start to take over financially as the person who's there as his only friend. So he's very isolated, and he does this in a very slow, he really, I think uses a lot of manipulative tactics, and he gets Marty to a point where he thinks that he's his only friend. Right. And he's his only
even in the
source
beginning,
of person,
if we're talking about the show, just within the first session, he's like, oh, well, let's go for a walk. Walk and talk therapy, that is a thing. People do it. But then it's he's walking him to another patient's business who runs a frame store. And all of a sudden he does the George Costanza thing where it's oh, I don't have my wallet. I don't have money. And then all of a sudden, it's
that's
almost
right. I forgot
testing
about
to
that.
see. So then Marty's oh, well, I could pay for the $40. And then Ike instantly is so sleazy. He's oh, well, actually, we've gone over our session hour. So this is, it's going to be $50 or whatever it would be. And then he's oh, well, you actually had to pay for 2 full hours because it's already 15, so it's very for himself. It's like I'm just
even though he's running errands for Ike.
Pictures with celebrities, which is so creepy. And just how he is just so obsessed with taking photos, either consensual or not, with these celebrities. That first interaction is very telling. Too. It's kind of like, okay, let me test the waters. Is he going to bite? Let me reach for my wallet. Oh, I forgot it. Let me just see if this.
Yeah. Let's see if this guy is that really sets the stage for him, because as a psychiatrist and as a person just who is aware that somebody's coming to him for help and he's telling his deepest, darkest secrets and really confiding in him, he knows that he's in a vulnerable state, and he's like, okay, what are his boundaries? Is he generous?
Oh, yeah.
Is he caring? Does he want to make sure? Is he like kind of a people pleaser? And Marty
take advantage
all of those things
and manipulate.
For sure. Yeah, he definitely does. And that's where Ike's brain kind of goes, like, you can see him kind of masterminding, like, oh, how far can I take this? And he takes it far, really, really far. So this relationship that they have spans over about 30 years. He was his patient for, I believe it was all of that time, technically. And I think it wasn't until a certain point that Marty finally saw, oh my gosh, this person is taking advantage of me and does not care about me. But up until this point, Ike has these tactics, the doctor, of really slowly, like almost like a parasite, just getting into Marty's system and being able to say, like, okay, first, like for the family business that Marty has, he kind of wiggles his way in there and gets a full-time position and gets like, pay, and kind of tries to like, to make decisions and tell him how to run it. Marty's sister is very suspicious of him from the start, but Ike is smart.
Fire her.
He's like, oh, I got to get her out because she could point out that I'm doing something wrong.
And that too,
doing something wrong.
Like if you ever have a therapist or doctor or anyone like that who's doing that, run or report them.
Yes, go run and then report them and cancel all sessions. Make sure there's nothing, no intertwined relationship, because that's another thing is he starts to infuse himself in every aspect of Marty's life that it's so hard to kind of shut him out. Ike then pushes it even further and sees that, in Marty's family, they're pretty well off. It seems like they kind of, come from some generational wealth that Marty inherited, and he mainly manages for, kind of the family, like his sister. Marty takes the doctor to this family like vacation home, which is really, really nice. And Ike sees this as an opportunity to be like, oh, I could throw lavish parties here and I could use this as like basically just tell people it's mine, and then have Marty be in the background, because Marty's kind of more of a background person. He's not a very social person. He's very introverted. He's very, kind of awkward socially. And he's just like, that's not his thing. He doesn't like to be showy, whereas Ike is very much loves the status, of like being wealthy and having nice things.
And it seems like his wife probably is too.
Showing
like
that
that's
off
something
and
too.
being
I
around
noticed
people.
like his wife is probably a big player in this too. What I found interesting when they first go to the house in the Hamptons or wherever it was, that he asks like, whose house is this? And Ike's, and Marty's like, it's mine. And then he, because I think he wants to know, like, is it your sister's too? Because he's like, oh no, I bought my sister's share off, just so it's like, okay, all right, so I can totally manipulate my patient.
Right. Yeah. He's very conniving and really, he's being let into this world that Marty has total trust in him, because not only is he somebody who's working towards making his life better, he's given him this illusion of, oh, I'm coming to you for help and my life has improved. Like, look at this, I'm using the vacation home. And, then Ike starts throwing parties, and Marty kind of feels like, oh, I have all these parties going on at my house, even though nobody knows who he is. All these people that are coming, they all think Ike owns the house, because he's basically
he has all his
appear that way,
patients come to, and that's also insane. Like if you think of it, like you're having a party and you invite your patients to your party, but he's inviting all his celebrity patients, and they're all going because for them, they see that it's normal, because he's probably never really had any lines of professionalism with his patients. It's always been like, all right, this is how we interact, and this is what you expect from your psychiatrist.
Yeah, there's no boundaries with him. And I wonder with Ike, This is just like kind of my own wondering if he was like kind of emulating some psychiatrists or, therapists to celebrities in like LA at the time that maybe he either perceived or maybe it was, I'm not sure, where there was kind of looser boundaries and maybe there were people who would invite, like it was kind of more considered a working relationship kind of thing, as opposed to, I think, how we would view it now. And hopefully most therapists would view it now.
Early 80s. So chances are he was in school for, med school for psychiatry, probably like in the 50s or 60s, just definitely a male dominated world. And who knows who he was influenced by at that time. Like who knows what his real reasons were to get into this field, if it was to help people or if it was to have control over, because there is definitely a power differential with your patients and being a psychiatrist, a male psychiatrist.
Yeah. I think there is a point of paternal medicine that was practiced probably around the 60s, 70s, and before. It was probably starting to change, maybe in the 70s or something. I don't quote me on that, but that's just from anecdotal, just watching and what I've heard stories of. The doctor knows all, you wouldn't question it. Usually male, usually white male, that paternalistic approach to it. And I think that is something that psychiatry has gone away from and has been able to see different theories of, like, it used to be just Freudian psychoanalysis and stuff like that and branching out to different points of view. But yeah, I think he trained in that and saw that, ooh, I can have some power in this dynamic. I think he must have always had this personality. Like there must have been something that shaped it to be able to think, I can manipulate people, I can get what I want out of this.
Yeah.
And maybe psychiatry at that time presented as, ooh, this is a good way to kind of be in the shadows. And
because even though they don't really go into his background so much, you can kind of get a glimpse of Ike. And maybe he didn't grow up as wealthy as Marty or other people he's trying to surround himself with. So there may have been that resentment, and that may have also kind of prompted his decision to have a position or a job that is very powerful. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And one that you could certainly manipulate, because you are literally being handed somebody's mind and, you're supposed to be ethically working with that and not taking advantage of it. But he just went, oop, what can I take advantage of in every single scenario?
They told me they don't have any support from anybody.
Poor guy.
They told me they have millions.
That's the perfect setup for Ike. Ike even talks Marty into like setting up a nonprofit foundation. All the profits end up being set up to be placed with basically just,
and then we find out ridiculous. Too from articles and the podcast that this isn't the first patient that he's done it to. So he's also had other people switch wills. So this was common practice for him.
Yeah, which is really scary. He's like that's a predator, right? That's like a financial predator, as well as it's so emotionally abusive what he did to this guy Marty, and we don't know the specifics of these other cases, but more than likely there was some emotional abuse involved in that. If there was this manipulation to be able to be placed financially in these people's lives, I don't really know. Like, I know I couldn't find too much on that specifically. I don't know if there's reasons why there isn't, but it's just, I did see some comments from people who, like, after hearing this story, they were saying things like, how could Marty have allowed this to happen? How could he not see it? And this is something that I think is, one of the main reasons why we wanted to discuss this is because emotional abuse is something where, he took away all of his safe contacts, the people that would be secure, like his sister, who maybe had her own issues, but she had the best intentions for her brother, taking all that away, isolating him, making him appear as the doctor, in kind of, in the hero in his life, and also the person who like could guide him, who has it out for him to be able to say like, okay, I have the best intentions for you. I'm the only person that's looking out for you. I've guided you this far. I've infused my life in your business. I've, kind of all this other stuff. All these other people, even at the family business, who have worked for Marty and Marty's father, like they're seeing that this guy is no good, but Marty just can't really see it, because it's almost like he's being, I think there's this feeling of like, oh, this is the only person that really knows me and sees me the best, when Ike has certainly placed himself in that position, and he's really kind of given him this understanding of, I'm the person that knows you and cares about you the most, but okay, if you want to go listen to them, kind of thing. And then Marty is the people pleaser. And this took place in so many sectors, so many areas, back and forth, and Marty being a trusting, genuinely good person who got caught in this at just the right point, that really can spark up this kind of codependent relationship that should not exist with your therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And
that does happen.
So it's actually not hard to see
medical
from that
professionals or therapists where your
that.
patient or your client really does look to you, and in a codependent type of relationship happening, but it's the professional's job to make sure that doesn't happen and to say, hey, I notice you're really leaning on me a lot, or you're not really wanting to make your own decisions, or you're kind of, stalled right now. How can we help? How can we work through this? Or what can we do? Instead of, I'm going to make this phone call for you, or I'm going to do this, or you're going to do exactly what I say, or, like this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
It was very much too. And we've talked about cults in the past too. It is very much like the cult of one.
Yeah. Like, I think Marty even says something like, I very much became invested in the culture of Ike, or I can't remember what he said, but it was very well put, like the life of Ike or something. Like, it was very much like that was how much he saw
because,
Ike
if you have somebody
as
who
person, and how much Ike had
is
set
able
up
to recognize what's happening to you, or all of a sudden put words into what you're feeling, it makes you feel seen. And, Marty had, seemed like he had such really severe anxiety. He was having panic attacks. He couldn't really make any decision. And so now you have somebody who's the complete opposite telling you what to do, not really giving you tools, but just basically the tools are, you call me, I'll do it, or, whatever it is, I'll tell you what to do. So it was the perfect storm for manipulation to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really goes against what we see as therapy now, which is that the person can be, they're the ones that are supposed to be empowered towards that's our goal, is to empower them to see, hey, how do you want your life to go, and how can you do that? Because if you take that power away, that just kind of that defeats the purpose of it. And he was really absolutely taking that over and then taking control of it. It was just like double victimization, and so wrong in that setting. And I have had clients, and I don't know if you have, it sounds like you have in the past, where there will be some people who come and they'll say, what do I do? Like, tell me what to do in this. I just want someone to tell me what to do. And, if you give them an answer and say, okay, break up with your boyfriend, right? If you do that, and then they realize that, and they do that, they follow that, right? And they realize, oh my gosh, that's not what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
Who are they going to be upset at? And then who are they going to start to feel more confused about, understanding them, like you and themselves? And it's not what you want in the end. And it's not that we don't want to help you, but
I mean, there are so many times when you're like, all right, I want to tell you the answer
and feel good.
I really would love to be able to tell you, but I can give you a couple ideas, or let's talk it out, or why do you want to go this way, or what do you, so I'm not going to leave them blank, blank and not help them, but I'm not able to really tell them what to do, because in the end, it's their life. They're doing it. Unless they're going to harm themselves or harm someone else or something like that, or there's other factors. But otherwise, we're there to guide and help them realize, like with Marty,
those exceptions.
I don't even think there's really any tools that were there to help him with his anxiety, except there were the distraction of his psychiatrist.
Right. Yeah. And like kind of being his friend and kind of making him out to be like the hero, the person who's solving all his issues, which he, of course, as somebody who's hurt and anxious, he's going to be like, oh my gosh, this person's really helping me. Like, he kept saying, no, you've helped me so much. I want you to have the right amount of money, and I really want to help you. No, I wouldn't be anywhere without you. He really feels that way because, that's something that a friend had done, of love and care, because they really wanted to help this person. That's maybe a different story, but where it comes from as a therapist and as someone who's supposed to be helping him gain those tools himself.
And there was something that was said
that That's just a different story. It's very
like in
manipulative.
one of the articles or podcasts or show or something, that when Marty had to have hernia surgery, and he was in the hospital for like a week or so or whatever. And I guess he didn't really have many visitors, and definitely did not have Ike and his wife visit. And that had been the catalyst that woke him up, because he had thought, wait a minute, this person's been in my life. And he actually thought he was his friend, because he even said, like, my friend, like, so I guess we're not friends. So that's kind of the eye opener, which they never were friends. This was his psychiatrist, but he also manipulated Marty so much that he's like, oh yeah, we're friends, but pay me. You still have to pay me hourly. You still have to do all this. So as soon as Marty got out of the hospital, he said he ended up taking them both out of the will. And I guess that's, probably canceled them off of everything, and ended up contacting, I don't know if he contacted a lawyer or contacted the state, the board. But either way, it was like, that was the realization, because before that, I think Marty really believed that they were friends. But in Ike's mind, of course, it was always transactional. It was never friendship.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was his breaking point. And that's where we see at the beginning, where it opens up in the series, where Marty is just breaking everything. He's upset because he realizes, oh my gosh, I've been used all these years, and this is not a true friendship. Right. This was wrong, what he was doing. And this person does not care about me as a person. Never mind all the things that he did to intermesh being friendship and somebody who is your therapist, and all these other things that are just confusing and weird. But he was openly just hurting him and not even considering him, not even in the slightest. So I think it just broke him. And he just, that opening scene of him breaking the basketball hoop, the glass behind it, and then just ripping things up and just being upset. That's the result of it. And and that's where he starts to file with the Department of Public Health, for licensure, saying like, this guy has done wrong. And then also, it stops being his patient. He writes a formal letter to stop being his patient, which is crazy, because that's 30 years after the start of their working together.
Even manipulating Marty into
victim,
honestly. So like when Marty's at one party, he's like, hey, I don't know if you ever thought of being an industrial psychologist. And he's like, oh, I've never done this. But then all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait a minute, I can charge every single person that works there. Which that's not how consultation would work. But it's like totally manipulation. And it's like, all right, so now even his wife, who seems very shady, is like, I don't know if that's how that works. But he finds a way to manipulate everything. And he's like, oh, Marty will pay it.
He's an opportunist in life through and through, transactional, does not have care. Whereas, Marty is the total opposite. He cares about people. He wants to make sure that they're okay. He has a lot of difficulty when he goes to Ike, but he is someone who is a kind, good, caring person, almost to his detriment, but also he was with someone who should not have taken advantage of that at all. And we do learn, in this being a true story, believe it or not, I'm sure there's some liberties taken in the series, and then the podcast probably represents it well, but that's the board of that holds the licensure for Ike asks him to basically revokes it. Is like, hey, we're asking for it back in 20.
So I think he said, so like, not too long ago in an interview that Marty said, like, over 30 years of his life has been like held hostage because of this. So now he's like finally able to live.
Yeah. And it's really, I think that's somebody that you cared about, that you let into your life, not only as a friend and somebody you thought really cared about you, because I mean, he was staying in like the guest house of his own house that he had inherited, and he didn't really seem to mind. He's a very kind of simple person. He's not materialistic. He doesn't care about hobnobbing with the snobs and anything like that. Whereas Ike's out there doing that left and right. And he's just realizing it's all coming at him when he realizes it in that moment, and probably slowly building up, but like really coming to the forefront of his brain. Like, I have just been taken advantage of so badly by a provider, by somebody who should have had my best interests, at heart. But not only that, as a person who's been solely the person in my life that I've let into my life and trusted. And really, it's heartbreaking to think of that, because that's a long recovery into Marty being able to trust anyone probably again. But yeah, the license is revoked from Ike, which is great. As of 2021, I know he appealed it. It said we don't know really what he's doing now, but probably running some scheme, something shady, right?
Did you see that office?
In a
It's just so
similar way that he's been
stupid.
doing it.
But it's like how he set it up, and you don't know if
gosh.
it's purposeful. So where everyone sits, it's like you get a plant in your face. So it's almost like you're controlled by the environment.
Yeah, it's his control. It's really, that's what he really wants to psychologically. He goes deep in there, and that's what's so dangerous about him. He's aware of these things, and he is given a license for these things, but you're to do good with it, right? You're to help people with it. And he is absolutely taking advantage of it to just say, what can I get? What can I squeeze from these people? So he is not a good therapist, folks, and he's not a good person, like, at all. He doesn't seem to be, from the way, represented here, but he is not a good therapist. So if you start to notice this, and hopefully I think we all know this, right? I think there was actually a time where therapy was not really talked about as much as it is
and
now.
Also, like it's happened. Probably, especially a psychiatrist, different than a therapist. A traditional therapist, you're like, like you picture, oh, well, he went to med school. It's, like he's referred to by, my clergy or my rabbi, or, my sister recommended him, so there's a lot of factors where it's like, well, this person is in power, and they must know more than I do, or know more than people in my life.
Yeah, there's a power dynamic. When you go to anybody, you go to a medical doctor, you go to a therapist, you go to a teacher, you go to a nurse, any of those positions where you are being, it's usually a one-sided relationship. This person is exposing things about themselves, or you're able to know things or examine things that the practitioner has the duty to be professional about that and hold that as sacred, and understand that you're trying to do good with that. That is part of the extreme ethical violation that
and that's one thing a lot of my clients will hear all the time, is I always am like,
Marty and other
be
people.
your own health advocate. Like, just whether it's your physicians, whether it's your therapist, whoever it is, you're allowed to question, you're allowed to fire them, you're allowed to look for a different referral, no matter what. Because that's what I always say too. You like, especially the first session or so, I'm like, of course I'd love you to stay with me, but you have the right to find a different one. You have a right to almost like shop around. And if there's ever a point, you be your own health advocate. And that goes in every aspect of your life.
Absolutely. And not to say that you should be on the lookout for this. I do not think that this is something, with the amount of exposure we have with professionals now and the amount of knowledge that we have, I don't think this would be as hidden for as long as it was. Possibly, I would hope not at this time, to be able to say, I think that's a great point, that you also have the right to say, this is not working, or maybe I just don't click with this person, or maybe I don't feel like this person has my best interests at heart, or I just don't like this person, like if that's something you just can't get over and it's interfering with your care, that is something you can advocate for. And I agree. I do the same thing with my clients. We all have to have a hard skin about that, right?
Yeah. And sometimes you stay with, even
and sometimes it just doesn't click.
Like your medical, sometimes you stay with them just because you feel like, oh, well, this is who I picked, but you don't have to. And same with the nice thing about therapy too. Like, there's Psychology Today, there's Good Therapy, there's other things that you can look for a therapist.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's part of it, is that the timing, in the 80s and the 90s, and even probably in the early 2000s, those sources were not as available. It didn't seem like you had so many choices. It also wasn't talked about as much. I do think this is, I think we almost have an over availability of sources that, kind of like, oh, do you need an appointment tomorrow? Needs, but I'm saying, like, it's talked about so much, it's used as advertisements on every single podcast and everything, like YouTube and TikTokers and everything. So I think that this is an absolute tale of how to not conduct patient and provider interactions of any sort, and to never be like
Don't like Ike.
Don't be like Ike. It says be like Ike. Don't be like Ike. Don't do it. Marty, the real life Marty,
they live in
is, you had
Thailand.
said
That's what I
he's
read.
like, he has a girlfriend and they're going to Thailand or maybe living in
Happy.
Thailand.
He said
or
he's
something
happier
now.
than he's been.
So he seems to be, that's great. That's really good. It's happy to hear. But so many things that just, like we could feel all of our ethical drillings kind of go, oh, no, when we were watching or listening to this. So yeah, this is a very sad story, but in the end, it sounds like Marty was able to reclaim himself. He did unfortunately lose a lot of time to that and learned a very, very hard lesson.
Probably
like
not.
Just
I mean, even the board or
so,
whatever said that
I don't know.
has remorse or wants to change.
So that is that. We thought this was a very interesting story. Of course, it relates to mental health and just ethical considerations and extraordinary violations of them, but also just discussing therapy in general. So we thought it would be a good topic. Are you ready for a fun question?
Oh.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask about that stuff because that stuff is just pure ethical violations and I don't want to ask about any of that. So if you could go to live in any country in the near future where, like without, money, jobs, things like that being a problem, where would you want to go to?
But I've always been fascinated with, it's not that exciting, like with Nova Scotia, like in Canada, because I love whales and I believe there's puffins there. So I think that has always been something. I don't know if I'd want to live there full time because I think it would get really cold in the winter. So I don't, but that's somewhere that's always fascinated me for some reason. I think it's mostly the whales and possible puffins because I'm already in the tropics. I live pretty hot, so I like where I am now. Yeah, my summer Nova Scotia place. What
It'd be
about
a good
you?
change. You could have like a summer winter thing going on. Yeah, that would be cool. The first place that comes to mind is like Norway. I think that would be I think they practice like hygge over there, which is the way of cozy living. I think they have beautiful views, very simple yet I think effective ways of living over there. I think there's a nice kind of introverted culture, but also very rich in
that sounds neat. Maybe
like
I'd
mythology and
sounds
folklore
nice.
and stuff that I just find fascinating. So
We're very we had to bundle up.
Yeah, we both have very cold places to go to.
We both
Yeah.
can
Oh,
talk
in the
about 'em when
Northern
you're in
Lights
Norway.
too. It's a very cool phenomenon. Anything
Yeah,
else
if you have a
to
therapist or
add?
psychiatrist like this, or you feel like it's on the ethical line, it's okay to quit and find someone else.
Absolutely. And if you feel like they are just this is their practice and they're maybe doing damage to other people, you may want to look into reporting. So let us know what you think. This was really interesting. Go check it out. The Shrink Next Door, I believe, is on Amazon Prime. Okay. And the podcast is on, I think, anywhere where you get it's on Wondery, I think, but I think you can get it anywhere, right? On any type of podcast platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wicked Psychotherapists and on Facebook we are The Wicked Psychotherapists. And don't forget, stay wicked
and keep your mind well. All right, have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye guys.